We'll begin episode 4 where part 3 leaves off in just a minute, but first of all, let's go back to Panthro and his Thunder Tank, since back in part 3, they were being attacked by Rotaro and his Dragstar, and Snarf is still being held prisoner. As for the Thunderians, they're still stuck on Fire Rock Mountain. As for Lino, well, good news since back in part 3, he had made it to the Black Pyramid's secret chamber, but now things are looking bad, and that's where part 4 begins. So back with Lionel, he thought that it was all over for him until it was now morning, and a blast of sunlight just came from the wall and caused the bandages to disintegrate. So, good news for Lionel, thanks to a little ray of sunshine, it disintegrated the bandages that he was once buried in since part 3. So good news now that Lionel's out of the bandages, then he realized, oh yeah, I forgot, my hair's still caught. So good news, now that he pulled his own hair out, he stands up, and now he's wondering what is going on and how did he manage to get out of the bandages. Then Lionel saw some sunlight that is coming from the ceiling, and now he remembers. It was the ray of sunshine that saved his life, and that's what caused the bandages to fall apart. Then Lionel remembers that the bandages only comes to life when it's at night, but in the daylight, they just ordinary rags. So for Lionel, now that he's free, all that's left for him to do is to go rescue the Thunderians at Fire Rock Mountain that have been prisoners since part 3. So with no time to waste, that is exactly what he did. So he left the pyramid's secret chamber. So meanwhile on Hook Mountain, now the Thunder Tank that has been attached since part 3, but now here comes a problem. Panthro, you remember him, he's now trapped underneath the tank, and he couldn't get out anywhere. If that's not bad enough, Panthro saw that the Thunder Tank's on fire. So back with the two vehicles, the Hovercat and the Thunderclaw, Cheetara notices that there's fire that's coming from up ahead. Tygra sees it too, and so they both rush to the scene to where the fire was coming from. So back with Tygra on the Hovercat, he was the first to arrive. He saw that the Thunder Tank is not only upside down, but on fire. And here's a bigger problem. He sees that Panthro's in trouble. Now Cheetara, who's on the Thunderclaw, she saw the exact same thing as Tygra did. But Cheetara's getting worried, and she says if something isn't done quick, then Panthro will be done for. So now it's up to her to put out the fire. So, instructed by Tygra and the Hovercat, that's exactly what Cheetara did. So good news now that the fire is out. It's now up to Cheetara and Tygra to figure out a plan to get Panthro out of the tank that's upside down since part 3. So by the time the tiger and Chitara had arrived, but they're not alone because Snowman and his sidekick Snowmeow, they're there too. So what Chitara and Tiger wanted to know from Panthro if he's okay. Well, good news, he's fine, and Snowman wanted to tell him that there must be a way to get him out somehow. But Panthro says, forget it, just leave me here, but they refused. They being the Snowman, Chitara, and Tigra. But Panthro insisted that the Thunderians need them. So even Tygra agrees, but said to Panthro, they need you too. So the snowman gives him the inspiration, Panthro that is, to never give up and to never quit. And then Tygra said to Chitara, let's go to our vehicles. I have an idea. And so they went off. So now that they're in the vehicles, the Hovercat and the Thunderclaw, so you're probably wondering what was the plan. Well, Tiger just told Chitara to have the Thunderclaw be above the tank itself, while the Hovercat with Tiger in it went to the side of it, and along with the snowman. Well, at first the plan seems to work until the tank fell down again. But Tiger says, don't give up. Give it all you got. And Chitara did just that with the Thunderclaw. And so, with two of the vehicles and of course the snowman's help, well, the plan worked. and wouldn't you know it, the tank was right side up again, thanks to their teamwork. But also the good news, and even better, Panthro was now free. So thanks to Tygra and Cheetara, and with a little help from the snowman, they're glad to see that Panthro's okay. So Cheetara was the first to ask Panthro a question if he was hurt anywhere, and Panthro said no. Did you take a direct hit anywhere? Tygra asked. Not only did Panthro said not really, but he said that Rotoro's Rastar's cannon's the one that did the damage more than that. Now that Panthro's in the Thunder Tank, it didn't have a problem starting up. So Panthro said that he owes Rotoro one, and of course he made his case that he and Rotoro had some unfinished business. Before the Thunder Tank can head off, Cheetara just told Panthro that he needed some rest. Then it's Tiger's turn to plead his case to say, Cheetara's right. We can go on ahead, he suggested. Well, Panthro had decided to decline Tiger's suggestion and said that the Thunderians may not have much time left. So finally, Tiger and Cheetara agrees to go on ahead in their vehicles, the Hovercat and the Thunderclaw. So the Snowman and his sidekick Snowmeow wishes the Thundercats farewell, and then it's Panthro and his Thunder Tank's turn to head off. And so everyone left Hook Mountain. So meanwhile, Sly, the leader of the mutants, had contacted Monkey and other mutants in his fist pounder to ask a question if he's in position, because the fist pounder's on his way to Fire Rock Mountain. Well, after Monkey had pleaded his case with Sly, the leader of the mutants, that he's on his way right now, that's what made Sly upset, and then told Monkey, you had all day to get there. And finally, Monkey says, okay, I'm there. And so there he is with his fist pounder, ready to set a trap for the Thunder Tank. So meanwhile, the Thunderians, you remember them, they were still inside the cell inside Fire Rock Mountain since part 3. They overheard that conversation and the plan from the mutants. So after the Thunderians have learned about the mutants' plan, that's when Bengali pleaded his case to say, we gotta do something about this. Then Lingso goes next to speaking his case because he agrees with Bengali. He says, indeed we do, and we must. So back in the Red Star with Vultureman of the mutants, Ratoro, and the still in prison Snarf, Vultureman just lets Ratoro know that someone is contacting them on screen. So Rotoro didn't hesitate to turn on the telescreen, and wouldn't you know it, it's Mumra. And when Rotoro and Vultureman of the mutants saw it, they were in shock and surprise. So Rotoro wanted to know from Mumra what favor he has for him. Well, Mumra says, I need you to meet up with the mutants at Fire Rock Mountain, he said, to reinforce them. Well, Ratoro just pleaded his case to Mumra to say he had the Thunder Tank destroyed, or so he thought, and then he said that it wouldn't be necessary to reinforce the mutants otherwise. So then Mumra has his turn to plead his case to Ratoro not to argue with him because he says in his case that he's not taking any chances. He also says that he wants the Thundercats eliminated immediately. All very well, Ratoro said. So after the transmission came to an end, Ratoro told Vultureman of the mutants to take the direct route as soon as possible. But Vultureman just pleaded his case to say that there's a problem. The direct route will take them to Tuskiana, to where Turmagar and his Tuskas live. So Ratoro pleads his case to ask a question. So what about it? Well, Vultureman says, for one thing, the Tuskas are the Thundercats' friends, he said. But Ratoro just laughs at it and dismisses it, and said, who cares about that? Just take the direct route the way I said so. And so Vultureman did. So long story short, meanwhile in Tuska country, Now there's Turmagar, the leader of the Tuskas. He has just been informed by one of the Tuskas that the Rastar is coming in their direction. Sound off the alarm, Turmagar said, and that's what the Tuskas did. And so they decided to prepare themselves for an attack. So, long story short, back with the Rastar, when it's about to come into the Tuskas' direction, so back with the Tuskas, they began firing at the Rastar every chance they got. So inside the Rastar, Ratoro knows what to do. He decides to use a cannon, and with the cannon, it decides to fire back on the Tuskas. So long story short, back inside the Rastar, Volterman made a compliment with Ratoro to say, "Nice shooting." Now Ratoro, who agrees with Volterman, he says one more shot for the cannon ought to do it. Now, the still in prison Snarf couldn't do a thing about it. He was dreaded with fear and worry. But then at the last minute, he decides to roll over, and aha, Snarf has a plan to use his tail, of course, to jump around a little bit. The first thing that Snarf did was that he bounced on top of Retoro's head. So, long story short, after Snarf did that, it causes the Rastar to go out of control, and Voltrum panicked. So, long story short, Ratoro just told Voltrum to activate the landing race immediately. So, Voltrum did. So, back with Ratoro and Snarf, they had quickly ejected the Rastar as soon as Voltrum landed the ship. Well, now that Ratoro and Snarf had ejected out, back with Voltrum inside the Ratstar, he tried to get the landing race to work. But there's only one problem. One of the landing ray works and the other doesn't. So outside the Red Star, Ratoro just told Volterman to fix the landing rays immediately, while he, on the other hand, will take care of Turmagar and his band of Tuskas. Back with Turmagar and his Tuskas, they are engaging an attack against Ratoro. Then, long story short, Ratoro uses his rat size to attack the Tuskas, including their leader. So anyway, while the battle between Ratoro and the Tuskas go on and on and on and on, that's when, back with Volterman, he just told Ratoro the good news inside the control room that the rending rays are functional again, but there's no telling how long they're going to hold. So after Ratoro was told by Volterman, "Hurry, hurry!" But Volterman, however, pleaded his case to say, "I'm not running away from any fight, especially from anyone." But Ratoro boards aboard the Red Star anyway, and so after that, the Red Star takes off. But before the Red Star can make its getaway, it crashed into the water. The Tuskas cheered, including their leader, that Ratoro and Volterman won't be bothering them anymore. But then Turmagar looked over his shoulder and saw someone or something yelling in the rocks. Before long, Turmagar knew who it was right away. It's Snarf, still in chains and gagged, with the tape, no doubt. Now, Turmagar, the leader of the Tuskas, can tell that Snarf has been through a lot, and he felt sorry for him. So, what the Tuskas did, they lifted him out of the rocks. So, now that Snarf's out of the rocks, what Turmagar did is that he used his guns to blast the chains. So, good news for Snarf, he's now free from the chains. So, now it's up to Turmagar to take the tape off. And boy, did that hurt. So even though Turmagar apologized, so he says, "Come with us. You must tell us exactly what had happened." Now, whether that he did or not is unclear. So late at night at the Tuskas camp, so after Snarf explained to Turmagar what had happened, and he says, "Oh my, that's terrible." So Turmagar suggested to Snarf that he must rest up for a while, but Snarf refused and says that the other Thundercats are counting on him, and there is no way that he's going to let them down. But then suddenly, Snarf just told Turmagar that he saw something coming from nearby. It's another campfire. And so he and Turmagar wasted no time to investigate. And what they saw is unbelievable. It's the Berserkers. So meanwhile, at the Berserkers camp, Hammerhand, the leader of the Berserkers, was giving each of a bag of gold to his crew members, Top Spinner and Rambam. But when Tom Spinner saw that Rambam had 2 bags more than he does, he got upset. Next thing you know, both Top Spinner and Rambam were fighting and arguing with each other. Then, long story short, after Cruncher had pleaded his case to Top Spinner and Rambam to say, while you two are busy arguing, look what the leader Hammerhand has. So after learning about it, Top Spinner went first to ask a question of what's the big deal, and then Rambam pleaded his case to say that it wasn't fair. Then Hammerhand, the leader of the Berserker, says, if there's more gold you want, then there's plenty to go around. But what the Berserkers didn't know is that Turmagar and Snarf were listening in. So Hammerhand says, well, here's the plan. Since Mumra had paid us so much, what we're going to do is simply this. We need to recapture the Thunderians. So in Hammerhand's case, he told his crew that the Thunderians have been sold once, and if that's so, then they can be sold again. So then he asked Top Spinner and Rambam a question. They were at Fire Rock Mountain, correct? And they both nodded. So long story short, after the Berserkers had discussed their plan back with Turmagar and Snarf, now Snarf is dreaded with fear and worry, and he's now wondering what he and Turmagar are going to do about it. It was right after Snarf had pleaded his case to say it's already bad enough for the Thundercats to deal with the Berserkers themselves. Now Turmagar, the leader of the Tuskas, after he thought about what Snarf said and what they're going to do about it, so he said, well, as a matter of fact, I have a plan. So even though it was never explained, but Turmagar and Snarf head off on a gunplin. So you're probably thinking what they're going to do. Well, they're going to plan to hijack the Berserker ship, of course. So good news, now that the Gunplin had made it to the Berserker ship, Snarf got off, and what he did first is that he tied a rope around the front of the boat. Then what he did next was that he uses uh, I don't know what he's using, but he's lifting up the anchor of the ship. But before he can leave, he hears something from down below. Remember the Burbles, Robert Bird, and Robert Bob that were captured by the Berserkers since 3 episodes ago? Well, good news, Snarf had found them. But the problem with the Burbles is that they don't even know Snarf. So Snarf told them, quick, use the lifeboat. This is your chance. So Robert Bird and Robert Bob did what Snarf said and used the lifeboat to escape. So now that the Burbles have managed to escape, back with Snarf, he joins back with Turmagar on his goblin. So now that's finished, it's up to the goblin to tow the Berserker ship away. So that's what it did. Well, back at the Berserkers' camp, when Hammerhand, the leader of the Berserkers, looked over his shoulder, he saw what was going on. The, the ship is getting away, so he and the Berserkers decides to pursue it. Once the Berserkers had boarded aboard the lifeboat, but there's a problem. Rambam just told Hammerhand, the leader of the Berserkers, that for some unknown reason their engine won't start. So it's now up to Top Spinner to, how you say, guide the lifeboat forward, because it's the Berserkers' only way to get their boat back. Well, that's going on. Meanwhile, back at Fire Rock Mountain, now remember back in part 3, Linkso has discussed the plan with the rest of the Thunderians. So Bengali just broke the chains off of Pumaira. So you're probably wondering, what was Linkso's plan? Well, before that can get underway, Lynx will just ask Pumara a question if she sees those rings that were hanging on the ceiling, and she says that she does. So what Linksel's telling Pumira to jump high enough to get to those rings, and so Pumira went and gave it her all, and wouldn't you know it, she did just that and caught one of the rings on the ceiling. So now that step one of the plan is done, now it's time for step two. To Linksel, of course. So what was his plan? To use the sonic vibration from his ears, of course. So meanwhile, Slide, the leader of the mutants, just heard a noise coming from inside of the cell, but he's not alone because Jackalman's with him, and he heard it too. So now it's up to the mutants to investigate. But before they could do that, long story short, a couple of mutants just saw their glasses break because of the sonic vibration that's coming from the cell. So after that, Jackalman of the mutants went to see what was going on. So he goes first inside the cell, only to be dropped in by surprise by Pumira. So long story short, after Jackalman was knocked out for a moment, after he got conked on the head, what Pumira did is that she grabbed a set of keys to unlock the chains from Bengali. That was right after she unlocks the chains from Linksel first. So back with Slythe, the leader of the mutants, he went inside. And before he knew what was going on, he was subdued by Linkso. So now it's the Dundarian's chance to escape. So meanwhile, Jackalman of the Mutants was sent by Slythe, the leader of the mutants, to go after the Thundarians that were about to get away. So anyway, back with the Thundarians who had just left their cell moments ago, they were about to make it out. But each time they go closer and closer to get their way out of there, they were getting weaker and weaker by the minute because of the Dundranium. And here's a bigger problem. The Dundarians now realize that their only way out is to get across. So Pomara says, then come on, what have we got to lose? We can't give up. So the Dundarians continue on. So later at the Black Pyramid's tomb chamber, long story short, Marmorantis pleaded his case to say that so far his plan was working, or in his case, everything went according to plan. But now, according to Mumra, what he says in his case, there's a bigger problem: how to get Lionel's sword out of commission. And then Lightbulb, Mumra has a plan. He said there's only one person that has fought with Lionel before, and that would be Hachiman. And he also says in his case, he'll be the person to do the job for him. So, what does he do? He decided to make Hachiman appear in the Black Pyramid's tomb chamber. So that's what he did. So once Hachiman had appeared in the Pyramid's tomb chamber, he was asking Mumra what's he doing here and why did he have to do this favor for him. Then Hachiman pleaded his case to say, now you know I will never serve you. That's true, Mumra says, but we got a problem. Lionel has dishonored you, he said. But Hachiman dismisses that claim to say that that's impossible. Maybe, Mumra says, I have something to show you that will convince you otherwise, he said. Then what Hachiman saw next was unbelievable. The image of his samurai ancestor. Inside Mumra's cauldron, that is. But wait, that's not all. What Hachiman saw next is that his ancestor samurai is suffering. So what Hachiman wants to know from Mumra what is going on and why is he suffering that way? Well, Mumra just pleaded his case to say that Lionel has his spirit trapped in his bondage somehow. But once again, long story short, that still doesn't convince Hachiman otherwise. So Hachiman pleaded his case to say Lionel was an honorable guy and etc. And of course, Mumra says true. He once had that honor, he says. But what if he has a lust for power somehow? He asked. Then Mama says it does tend to ruin one person's mind. And of course, Hachiman agrees with that because he says in his case that had happened to a good guy once. So Mama says, I want you to destroy the Eye of Thundera for me. If you do, then your samurai ancestor will be set free if you did that. Then, by surprise, long story short, Hachiman just heard the voice of his samurai ancestor asking for his help to avenge him, if you will. So finally, after being convinced otherwise, the third time, well, the saying goes, the third time's the charm. Hachiman finally realizes what is going on and pulls out his iconic sword that he has, the Thunder Cutter. So you know what this means. Momura's plan of deception works on Hachiman. So before Hachiman can get on his mission, he wanted to know where he is. Why, simple, Momura says. You'll find him on Fire Rock Mountain. Even better, that's where you'll meet him. And so Hachiman was sent on his way. So speaking of Lionel, who had just left the pyramid moments ago on the skycutter that he borrowed from Slythe back on Hook Mountain, he had just arrived on Fire Rock Mountain. So now that he found a place to land the skycutter, now here comes the problem. For Lionel, there's a bunch of Thunderanium everywhere, and he's not so sure how he's going to get across. Now that Lionel has saw a bridge that's up ahead, he figured the only way across is that bridge. But he has to get across it in fast. But before that can get underway, Lionel has to let his friends know where he is so that they could find him. So he did it what he knows best, using his sword to project a Thundercat signal. So that's what he did. The first Thundercat to see the signal is Panthro and his Thunder Tank. So now that he sees it, he's now on his way to where Lino is at Fire Rock Mountain. The next two to see it were Tygra and Cheetara in the Hovercat and the Thunderclaw. And when they see it, they're on their way. The last two were Wily Kid and Wily Cat back at Cat's Lair. And when they saw it, they are now on their way. So back on Fire Rock Mountain, now that Lionel's friends are on their way, but he should have realized right then that he wasn't alone, because Hachiman, who had just left the Black Pyramid moments ago, he decided to settle the score with him. But before that can get underway, that's when Hachiman pleaded his case to say, well, you may have summoned your friends, but I got bad news. They're not going to save you in time. So when Lionel turns around and looked at him, and then he's asking Hachiman a question. What are you doing here? Well, Hachiman just claimed a case to Lionel to say that he's been bad, and now he wants to sell things. So Lionel asked him another question. What are you talking about? Then Lionel wants to know, what are you saying this for? We're friends, remember? Really? We're friends, you say, Hachiman says. So answer me this. What kind of a friend like you wants to imprison an ancestor of a friend? What do you mean, ancestor? Lionel asked. But before Lionel can continue to plead a case, that's when Hachiman says, don't try to deny it. And then he just suddenly lets slip that he knows this because Murmur told him so. And when Hachiman said that, that's when Lionel realizes that it was all part of the plan. So he tries to convince him that he's been lying to him. Momra, that is. But unfortunately, in Hachiman's case, he didn't want to hear about it. And so he told Lionel that Momra had shown him what Lionel did. And so he pulled out a thunder cutter. So Hachiman told Lionel to prepare himself for a battle, but Lionel refused and says, no, I refuse to fight you. You're my friend, he said. But just before the battle can begin, that's when Hachiman lost footing of the piece of rock from the cliff. And that's when Lionel panicked and says, hang on, I'll save you, he said. And so Lionel rushed to the scene. So good news, long story short, Hachiman was saved thanks to Lionel. Now confused, Hachiman asked a question. You saved my life, even though I tried to destroy yours? But then Lionel starts to lose his balance, just like what Hachiman did. Before Hachiman can rescue Lino, he saw the assassin spirit of his ancestor, just like he did back at the Black Pyramid's tomb chamber. Again, the voice that was asking Hachiman to release his spirit to avenge him. Then, long story short, after Hachiman saw the spirit of his ancient samurai ancestor, just like he did back at the Black Pyramid's tomb chamber, he again tries to swipe at Lino with his sword, the Thunder Cutter. Could this finally be it for Lino? And what about Hachiman? Would he make his last desperate attempt to save his life just as Lino did his? Well, we're about to find out. So that's the end of episode 4 in part 4.